Welcome to Life Stories, where real-life tales of betrayal, triumph, and unexpected twists unfold. Today, we're diving into a story of family secrets, manipulation, and the ultimate act of rebellion. Imagine being invited to a surprise family meeting, only to find out that it's not a celebration but a plot to tear you apart. What happens when a woman stands up for herself and exposes the dark truths hidden by those closest to her? Stay tuned to find out. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and start today's journey with us. I never imagined that a simple family gathering could unravel everything I thought I knew about my life and my marriage. It started with a message from my sister-in-law, Hannah. To be honest, we'd never been close. She only reached out when her mother needed something or to complain about something in her life. So when I received a text from her, I was immediately suspicious. The message was cryptic, almost too polished in its phrasing. "Hey, we're having a small family gathering this Sunday at Mom's house. It's important, so please be there at 3 p.m. Don't tell Blake. It's a surprise." I showed the message to my best friend, Claire. She didn't mince words. "This sounds fishy. Why would Blake not know about this? His family is everything to him." I agreed, but still, something in me urged me to go. Maybe it was the need for closure or some unexplained urge to see what was going on behind my husband's back. Blake had always been very close to his family, especially his mother, and it never occurred to me that there could be a side to them I didn't know about. Little did I know, that afternoon would change everything. When I arrived at his mother's large, lavish home, I found that everyone was already there: his parents, Hannah, his brothers, even his aunt and uncle who lived out of state. The living room had the atmosphere of a council meeting, everyone sitting in tense silence. The moment I walked in, I knew something was off, but I couldn't have predicted just how deep the betrayal went. "Sit down," Blake's mother, Sylvia, said. Her tone was calm but firm. I remained standing. Something about the way they were all seated made my gut twist with discomfort. "What's going on?" I asked. Before anyone could answer, Blake's father, Robert, slid a folder toward me. "We need you to sign these. It's for the best." My heart skipped a beat as I looked down at the papers. Divorce papers. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. I couldn't help it. I laughed. "You've got to be kidding me." Sylvia didn't seem fazed. "You don't fit in with this family," she said, her voice cold. "You don't respect our traditions. And you're holding Blake back." Hannah, who had been silent until now, chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "We're handling this so Blake doesn't have to deal with the distress. You'll be better off without him." My blood ran cold. The audacity. They actually thought they could force me to sign divorce papers just because they didn't like me? Because I didn't fit their narrow, suffocating view of what a wife should be. I could feel my hands trembling. But I held my composure. "Where's Blake?" I demanded. "Where is he while you're doing this?" Robert's eyes shifted uncomfortably. "He doesn't know about this," he replied. "We're trying to save him from the stress." I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. They were ambushing me behind Blake's back, trying to erase me from his life without him even knowing. "And you expect me to sign these without even consulting him?" I asked, unable to mask the shock in my voice. Sylvia smiled like she had already won. "It's for the best," she repeated. That's when I did something I'd been planning for weeks, though I didn't know when the right moment would come. I pulled out my own folder and placed it on the table. I felt a small sense of satisfaction as I slid it across to them. "Actually," I said calmly, "I have a surprise for you too." The shock on their faces was priceless. Robert's hand shook as he snatched the papers, his face going from arrogant to pale as he flipped through them. I could see the fear rising in his eyes. And I knew right then that my plan was about to unravel everything they had been hiding. The silence in the room was suffocating as Robert flipped through the pages in his hand, his face growing redder with each document he skimmed. He looked at me with disbelief, his mouth opening and closing like he was about to speak but couldn't find the words. The others leaned in, curiosity and anxiety written across their faces, though none of them dared to speak. What is this?" Robert finally stammered, his voice strained. I remained calm, looking him straight in the eye. This, I said, is proof of everything, proof of what you've been doing to Blake. And to me. Hannah, who had been quiet until then, leaned over her father's shoulder to take a look at the papers. Her eyes widened as she scanned the contents. And I saw the unmistakable flash of panic in her gaze. How did you get this? She asked, her voice quivering with something I couldn't quite place. I've known for a while. I replied calmly. I was just waiting for the right moment. The truth was, I'd suspected for months that something wasn't right. Blake's family had always seemed perfect from the outside. But there was an undercurrent of control, manipulation, and hidden agendas that I couldn't ignore. When I stumbled upon a few strange bank statements and emails, I began digging deeper. It wasn't easy, but I slowly pieced together the evidence, waiting for the day I could finally confront them with it. Blake's uncle, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the room, leaned forward and took one of the documents from Robert's hand. Is this true? He asked, his voice low and cautious. Robert didn't answer immediately, but his silence was all the confirmation I needed. His face turned even paler, and his hands began to shake as he fumbled with the papers. His usual air of authority was gone, replaced by the unmistakable look of someone caught in a lie too big to escape. I turned to Blake's mother, who had been silent all this time, but I could see her face had gone completely pale. The realization had clearly hit her as well. She looked like she was trying to muster some sort of defense. But her lips trembled as if she knew there was no way out of this. The walls were closing in, and there was nothing they could do to stop the truth from spilling out. Just then, Blake walked into the room, his brow furrowed in confusion. Hey, Mom said there was some kind of meeting, he said, pausing when he saw the mess of papers spread out across the table. His gaze flicked between his parents and me, his expression unreadable. His mother tried to brush it off, her voice wavering as she forced a smile. Oh, Blake, sweetheart, sit down. We can explain everything. But I didn't give her the chance to twist the story. Before anyone could speak, I stood tall and addressed Blake directly. Your family tried to force me to sign divorce papers behind your back, I said, my voice steady but firm. But they didn't expect me to have my own paperwork. Blake looked at me, confused and clearly rattled. What do you mean? He asked, his eyes darting between the papers and me. I pointed at the folder in front of me. That's proof of everything, bank records, emails, hidden transactions, I said. You should take a look. His eyes widened as he flipped through the documents, and his expression morphed from confusion to shock. His breathing became shallow, and I could see the color drain from his face as he read the hard truth. Dad, what the hell is this? He gasped, his voice breaking with disbelief. But still, no one answered. Not a single word came from his parents. And in that silence, the weight of the betrayal settled heavily in the air. The room was thick with tension as Blake continued to flip through the documents, his hands shaking. He could barely breathe as he read the details of his parents' actions, fraudulent loans, shady investments, and the countless times they had drained his bank account for their own failures. His jaw clenched, and I could see the betrayal in his eyes. The way the ground beneath him seemed to shift as the truth unraveled. This can't be real, Blake whispered, almost to himself. He looked at his father, his voice full of pain. Dad, tell me this isn't true. Robert's silence spoke volumes. His eyes were downcast, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles were white. He was too ashamed to look his son in the eye, too defeated to offer any kind of defense. Is this real? Blake repeated, his voice breaking. I nodded, my heart aching for the man I loved but whose family had poisoned him for so long. It's real, I said softly, and it gets worse. I pointed to another document. This one proves that your parents put our house up as collateral for one of their failed loans. If we hadn't found out in time, we would have lost everything. Blake's face contorted with anger and disbelief. He turned to his father, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage and sorrow. You did what? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. Robert's face flushed with guilt. But he remained silent, unable to look at Blake. For once, he couldn't hide behind his facade of control and manipulation. It was all exposed, and the weight of it was unbearable for both of them. I wasn't finished yet. Your family made me the villain, Blake. I continued, my voice steady but filled with emotion. They painted me as a distraction while they bled you dry. And now, they tried to get rid of me before I could tell you the truth. Hannah, who had been sitting at the edge of the room with her arms crossed, couldn't hold her composure any longer. She snapped, that's a lie. You're making this all up. I looked at her calmly, unfazed by her outburst. Oh really? I asked. Then maybe you can explain why you were bragging to your friend about how easy it was to trick Blake into signing financial documents without reading them. Her face turned crimson, and she opened her mouth to speak. But no words came out. She was caught, her own words. Her own actions now exposed for everyone to see. I reached into my bag and pulled out the damning evidence. Screenshots of her messages. Her bank transfers. Everything. I have all the proof. I said, turning to Blake. Your family isn't just selfish. They're criminals. Robert slammed his fist on the table. His face twisted with fury. Enough, he roared, his voice full of threats. But I didn't flinch. You don't get to decide that anymore. I said, my voice sharp. You've lost the right to control me or anyone else in this room. Blake's face was pale, his breathing ragged as he tried to process everything. He looked at his parents, who were both visibly shaken, and then at me. For the first time in our entire relationship, I saw him see things clearly. I'm done with all of this, he said quietly, his voice low but resolute. I'm done being controlled by them. I smiled. Good, I said, sliding a pen across the table. Now, sign my papers. Blake hesitated, his hands still trembling as he stared at the divorce papers I had placed before him. His family's world, their power, their control over him, was about to collapse in an instant. I knew it was terrifying for him, but it was also liberating. His hands hovered over the pen, but before he could pick it up, Robert leapt out of his chair, his voice a low growl. No, he spat, his face contorted in rage. You are not signing that. I turned to Blake, my gaze steady. He is signing it, I said firmly, and after that, we press charges. Fraud, identity theft, stealing money, you name it. A forensic accountant will have a field day with this. The tension in the room was suffocating. Robert's face had turned ashen, his fists clenched in fury. Sylvia, his wife, looked on in disbelief, her face pale and her hands trembling. Hannah, standing off to the side, was fuming, her fists clenched at her sides. Blake stared at the pen for a moment, his body rigid, his mind racing. Finally, with a deep, shuddering breath, he reached for the pen. The moment his hand closed around it, everything changed. This was the beginning of the end for his family's control. Everything they had built, the manipulation, the lies, the financial ruin they had created, was about to crumble before their eyes. Blake signed the papers, and with that, their perfect world shattered. The moment Blake signed the papers, everything changed. His family's grip on him, their manipulation, their control, gone. It was as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. And for the first time in a long time, I saw him stand tall. It wasn't just a divorce. It was the destruction of the toxic empire his parents had built around him. As we left their house, hand in hand, I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. Not over Blake, not over his family, but over the years of lies, deceit, and manipulation they had forced us both to endure. We walked away free to live our lives without their control, without their poison. In the days that followed, everything came crashing down for his family. Robert's business was investigated for fraud, and the bank repossessed their house. Hannah was arrested for embezzlement and money laundering. They lost everything, money, power, and their reputation. I moved on, built a new life, and found peace in knowing that, in the end, it wasn't me who destroyed them. They did it to themselves. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more life stories.